Afternoon, folks, and welcome to another Writer's Showcase. I am your host, Lord Captain Commander Dunn, and I'm going to bring in some of my guests, starting off with Mr. Aspiring Writer.
I swear to God, if you come within my arm's reach, I will strangle each and every motherfucking one of you in front of the goddamn camera, and they can take me to jail for all I care. You filthy sons of bitches. I hope you all die of herpes. Do you understand? You can't even die of herpes, and I hope you do.
Maybe they could, get it on their lungs.
Worst fucking movie in the history of movies.
Oh, that represents my soul so much. That is a rant I would fucking do.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah. I just found that. I was just like, oh, I gotta use that. That's a good one. That's one of the best rants ever.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, especially since we're doing Bad Comedy Month. We just did the freaking Cat in the Hat and Your Highness. Honestly, Your Highness was worse than Cat in the Hat. As far as experience goes. Commentary forthcoming, folks.
I think the Cat in the Hat will give me more nightmares, though.
Probably. Anyway, let's bring on the Bard.
Here's to the Bard and the calling me plum. Here's to the beast and the rest of you scum. The cage is locked in and the town is aflame, and it's ours for the taking, though you get the fame.
I'm just thinking about the rant too. I'm going, how many hours have I wasted being the dancing monkey for you? How many hours of my life will I never get back because I decide to say, I think I'll go on Dunn's stream today?
Are those hours not worth it at least 50% of the time?
No.
Somewhere in the vicinity of, I think in terms of the bad movies we watched, somewhere in the vicinity of, 20 hours?
A full fucking day I'm never getting back.
Maybe more? I'm not sure.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm not sure. Since we had the Transformers movies, those are kind of a movie and a half usually.
Yeah. We had the sequels. Point is, I've wasted a lot of fucking time here.
Yeah.
Don't pretend you have something better to do.
Sad part is he's right.
Alrighty. Let's bring in the Commissar.
You still haven't gotten to Death of Stalin yet, have you?
No. We're
Okay.
doing bad comedies.
I will say though about those insults though, the best insult I ever heard was, "I hope you die in a freak yachting accident." Not even at sea. I hope you're just walking down the street one day and a yacht falls out of the sky and hits you on the head.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. Alrighty.
So, who's on first?
I was just thinking aspiring and go clockwise.
Well, actually, if we can we put me to second to last?
Second to last? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
thanks.
How come?
Spire, and me, and then Bard, and then Lord Commander.
Alright, so we'll go in an X formation.
And the reason being is because Becca should have just gotten off of work, and she wanted to listen to it live. So I promised I'd save my part for near the end.
Sounds like a plan.
So, on now chapter 24. Previous chapter, I introduced my final main POV character, Vampira. It was basically a repeat chapter of what happened between Q and Vampira, except from Vampira's perspective. And now we see a little bit of what happens afterwards for her. Vampira awoke to a tentative tap, her eyes open only so slightly as to still appear asleep. It was one of the maintenance crew, looking very nervous as he reached to her again. Opening her eyes fully, she stood to her full height, dwarfing the fillies and casting a shadow down on him. Backing away, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead, the fillies cleared his throat. We've landed, Mist. What would you like to be referred as? Keeping her expression passive, Vampira felt a twinge of annoyance. None of the angels had official ranks, remaining outside of the command chain, and nobody had a real grasp of where they would fall in the command chain, including herself. She sometimes had the authority to command generals, while at the same time having to follow their orders and strategies for her. So when someone asked what was the proper way to refer to her, she often couldn't answer without having to admit she had no official title or rank and could just be referred to by name. Whereas subordinates, it wasn't so much of an issue, as none would have the courage to refer to her with just her name, but she had learned never to share it out with anyone from the royal families, among others. Dodging the question, she asked, "We've arrived on Shea Prime, I presume?" The fillies nodded. "We landed at the Capitol building not long ago. It's twilight hours right now." He broke off as she turned away from him, a relieved exhale reaching her ears. Exiting the cockpit, she saw her squadron pilots waiting outside. Suppressed smiles turned to pursed lips as she glared at them. They had purposely delayed waking her upon arrival so they could send a maintenance worker inside and watch him sweat. Waiting until everyone's foreheads were glistening, Vampira said coldly, "I expect to be informed immediately upon arrival, and no later. I also expect maintenance to not be taken away from their duties to perform tasks that should be done by my pilots. Is this understood?" After a hasty standing of attention and apology for acting unseemly, Vampira left them at ease. She was more upset that they'd wasted her time than the unprofessional behavior. Walking down the ramp of her freighter to the private landing dock, she saw someone was waiting for her. Wearing the white cloak and black uniform the attendants and staff of the Capitol building bore, the fashion on Shea Prime surrounded around cloaks, purple embroidery that tapered off to the edges of the cloak marked him as her personal aide. A position that, to her amusement, was considered prestigious, but required them to work no more than a standard week a year, and be available on Shea Prime should she need him. A half-human, half-fillies, Eagle had red pupils and skin only a few shades off from matching his cloak. His short-combed hair was gray rather than white, and he was short even without being compared to herself. Vampira scowled at him, and Eagle grinned. Her expression softened as she reached him, a smirk of her own hidden underneath her mask. "I see you still don't know how to be properly intimidated." Eagle chuckled as he walked alongside her. "You have plenty of others who are properly cowed by your presence. Those two dock workers, for instance." He pointed at two workers in gray uniforms that had lingering stains working on a shuttle. One of the workers looked up and, at seeing Vampira, returned to his repairs, his efforts reinvigorated. "I wasn't even glaring," Vampira mumbled. "A curse and a gift, I'm sure." Eagle nodded to those they passed, who would scurry away when they thought she couldn't see them. "That's why you have me, to make them feel more welcome." Inside the Capitol building, the sound of engines and dock workers disappearing behind them were replaced by the sounds of their feet on the black tiles rimmed white. Red drapes fell down the height of the towering corridor in between black pillars, the ceiling designed to look like a starry sky. Those they passed would go wide-eyed for a moment at seeing her, before continuing on as normal, their pace unchanged. All the attendants were aware of her yearly visits, and perhaps even used to them. Sorry, went down further than I needed to. It's like, "So are you going to tell me why your arrival was delayed?" Eagle asked. Vampira raised an eyebrow. "Forward today, aren't we? If I haven't told you yet, do you think it's perhaps you aren't privy to why?" Is that the case? The corner of her lip turned up. I'll keep it brief, and as always be discreet about what I tell you. I and some other angels had to go to Sullen 2 and wait for a month to try and capture the rogue Gladys Eaton. You captured Q? He let out a whistle. How come I haven't heard anything about that? He should be being transferred to E2 Prime soon. Once there, they'll announce his execution before Executor absorbs his soul. Ikil nodded. A month on Sullen 2, though. Must have been awful. Weather there is absolutely atrocious. You know, there are people who would say the same about Shay and his unpredictable rain, she pointed out. Ikil made a dismissive gesture. Most of them don't last an hour, and the McKee loved that kind of weather. But the cold. Being underground? He shook his head. Couldn't stand not having a sky. Speaking of sky, how was Royalty's show? A sly grin grew on his face. You can tell me. She's doing it today. Frowning, Vampire asked, wasn't it supposed to happen during my last assignment? It was, but someone convinced her to wait till your arrival. Speaking of someone, we have reached your quarters. Looking away from Mikil, she stopped when she saw Cassidy waiting for her. She was human this time, their skin a smooth brown along with her hair, which flowed past her shoulders freely. Her eyes were two shining emeralds in contrast with her ruby lips, her nails red garnets. Underneath her red and purple cloak, she wore a white halter dress, a golden cord tied at her waist. Making sure nobody else was around, Vampira took off her mask. Cassidy walked over to her, and Vampira noticed Cassidy had made herself short this time, just barely taller than Ikil. Wrapping her arms around her neck, Cassidy pulled her down for a kiss, refusing to let go until Vampira had the gasp for a breath. Missed me, I see. You were gone longer than usual, and I couldn't even call you. She reached up to cup Vampira's cheek. I know it might be sudden, but I convinced Mother to delay her show until your arrival, if you're up to it. Putting her hand over Cassidy's and holding it, she turned to Ikil. Actually, I had just been made aware before arriving. Ikil? Yes? I think your services are currently unrequired. Take the rest of the day off. Enjoy the show. Keeping his expression passive, he chuckled. Like I don't have enough days off. Very well, I'll get out of your hair. Would you like me to put your sight inside your quarters for you? Starting, Vampira took the sight off her back. She had forgotten it was there. Handing it to Ikil, she waited for Cassidy to lead the way. Knowing her, she had likely had a spot for them chosen. Smiling, Cassidy grabbed her hand and pulled her at not quite a run to a private terrace. It was dark when they reached the top, the sun well below the horizon, but the sky was not completely black. A huge swath of glowing green gas had been placed among the clouds. Royalty had begun her tradition. The details of how it started were still unclear to her, but she knew the reason it continued. Cassidy enjoyed the show, of the painting in the sky as far as the eye could see, and so, even after centuries, Royalty made time to keep up to tradition. The show was a widely popular attraction, and Vampira was sure the streets would soon be packed, if not already. A look down at the grid-like city showed lights on the rooftops of buildings, reserved for those willing to pay for a quiet spot to watch. But for all those watching, the show was meant only for Cassidy. Leaning against a gilded railing, Cassidy leaned her head on Vampira's shoulder as she watched, forcing her to remain hunched and not disturb her. Looking up, she saw that one scene was already finished. It was a depiction of an adult echidna with its brown hood up and wings spread. Highly sought-after, intelligent avians that had telepathy to communicate. Seeing it brought back a mix of memories. Glancing at Cassidy, Vampira noticed she had grown more solemn. She was remembering as well. The show continued, and Vampira let her mind wander. While Cassidy still enjoyed these showings, she had mostly grown bored of them after half a century. She was more worried about who had been chosen as a replacement for Gollum, and about the dispute between the Supreme Commander and Executor. The issue hadn't gone public yet, but that point was nearing, and when it reached, the angels would be recalled until the matter was settled. A shift caught her attention, and Vampira saw that Cassidy's skin, hair, and eyes were all shifting different colors. An effect of being a source's daughter. Well, two sources. Thinking of Barrage reminded her of Quidus. His transfer should be happening soon. Would Mark's worries end up being warranted? Perhaps she should have requested that he be put under higher guard. Maybe even suggest Barrage send some of her royal guards for it. Cassie lifted her head from her shoulder, and Vampire realized that the show was complete. The entire sky was glowing from numerous colored gases, making a circular painting containing 8 scenes. Most she recognized. The world of Shea Prime, mostly brewed from its oceans. A depiction of her and her siblings breaking the ground with lightning upon a horde of Evoluto. One scene caught her eye, however, one that she remembered seeing only a few times. All the 5 sources were there, side by side, each represented by their colors, in the midst of space. In front of them, a spot of dark blue seemed to face them, 2 strips of white on either side. She still didn't know what it depicted. There were a few battles where all 5 sources were present, and in none did she recall them fighting alone in space. And what was the blue dot supposed to be? She inquired about it with royalty, and left with the clear message that she shouldn't ask about it again. Vampire turned to leave and stopped when Cassie didn't follow. She was still staring at the sky, and was no longer shifting colors. The skin and hair returned to her earlier brown. Cass? She didn't respond, keeping her eyes at the gaseous painting. Looking back up, Vampire saw what must have caught her attention. One of the 8 scenes royalty made showed her and Mirage who had a child held between them. Cassidy, not even a year old and wrapped in an orange shawl. It wasn't the scene that Cassidy was thinking about, but what it reminded her of. If she wasn't so distracted, she would have seen it too. Cass, she's fine. Wherever she is, she's fine. Sniffling, Cassidy wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. That's not it. Wrapping her arms around Cassidy, Vampire watched the gases mix together like watercolors with her. I know. Slowly, the gases mixed together until the entire sky was gray, and then dissipated, swept away by the wind. Cassie took a deep breath and then turned to her. Tears gone. Quietly, they made their way back to their quarters, and, keeping the lights off, Vampire locked the door and made sure no one would disturb them. End of chapter. Thoughts, concerns, critiques. Oh, hey, you've arrived for the last 5 minutes.
I feel that the quote, "the fun has arrived," thank you very much, is only too appropriate.
Where was I 5 minutes ago?
To answer your question, it's been a while since I've been part of any of the showcases, and to be honest, watched any. I have no fucking clue what's going on. Like, I need a recap.
Yeah, I wouldn't turn on a recap either.
Well, I thought I gave one, but sure, I'll give you a more complete recap. Basically, there was a set of 13 chapters following Triple, a triple host from a mind control slave camp who was rescued by the revolutionaries. She's learning from them. She's trying to get information. She's been reading their minds to learn more. And give me a sec.
So in terms of things, it's just okay, just a little bit of downtime chapter, not really much plot advancement, at least that I could see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, someone was disturbing me. It is not exactly the most plot-heavy chapter. It's meant to be mostly a character thing, where we introduce Vampire and Cassidy. Vampire is leader of the Angels of the Executor, and she gets 1 week out of the year to spend time with her wife. And this is that 1 week.
All right.
I don't remember that being
1 week of time off a year. Yeah, she needs to talk to the union. She's getting screwed over for her benefit.
She truly is.
We absolutely have a wage theft case in here.
Yeah. There's a few mentions of her having a week, specifically being that her week off. There's still more references in the next chapter if it's unclear. And I did not specifically say Cassidy was her wife, but they do kiss, and they very much act very nice together. And I'm just going to avoid saying outright that they're married until I need to, because I don't think I need to just say, "Oh yeah, we're married."
Hi, my name is Trans.
She,
Oh, what game was that? I think it was like Baldur's Gate or something.
Tarek, you make fun.
Yes.
Cassidy's a shapeshifter.
I still make fun.
Indeed. I got no context for the content, but your narrative voice is great as always. They don't need actually much context. It's Vampira's leader of Death Angels, and she's visiting her wife. That's really it.
That seems like a lot. Like, again, if you come in after like a few weeks of not being here, you're gonna forget a lot of like the entire plot. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
Yeah. But yeah, so Vampira just captured Q Laodicean, which is he's a rogue who's been kind of messing with the sources for a few years, robbing ships. We see her
I
capture
thought you
him.
said mething, like literally doing meth.
Mething?
Mething.
Oh. I was like, where did you get that word from? Oh, messing. Yeah, he's been stealing ships, blah blah blah. He's got captured. He got set free in the last chapter of his by the revolutionaries, and now we're here with Vampira, who I know you all forgot, so I'll just remind you: the end of Triple's chapter does show Vampira boarding their ship.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, so that's kind of meant to be the thing of we've seen Vampira as an antagonist up to this point, and now we're seeing her with her wife.
Okay.
So it's like, why are we following this character? And this and the next chapter are fairly quiet in that there's nothing that plot heavy. They're important still because Vampira and Cassie's relationship is probably one of the most important.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Did it seem too slow ever?
Not particularly.
No,
No, that seemed fine.
it's about good.
Because I like interspersing quiet chapters between the active ones, because we just had an active one, and now we got two quiet ones and then an active one again. So I'm trying to like keep it nice and divided.
All right.
Anything else?
I got nothing.
Nah.
Very nice.
Okay, so am I up then?
Yes, so.
Well, Tarek, you could go since she's here.
I
And we
could,
do
but
clockwise.
we've already. Carl, just go.
All right, if you insist.
I do insist.
Okay,
Indeed.
so this is chapter 18 of The Waters of Acre. Now, if you will recall from last time, Shenna had a wonderfully awkward conversation with everyone's favorite Spectrum Kid, fountain of political navel-gazing, and shameless author's elf insert, Kieran. And this next chapter is going to be sort of a montage, a passage of time chapter. So, continuing in the trend set by aspiring writer. So let's just get started with chapter 18, Knowing Things. It wouldn't be quite accurate to say that Kieran opened up to Shenna. His indifference to small talk and personal conversation never wavered for an instant. On the other hand, he didn't seem to be hiding anything in particular. He would answer any personal questions Shenna posed to him, terse though his responses could be at times. Nevertheless, as the weeks went by, Shenna gradually learned more and more about Kieran. He was the youngest of 7 children, 2 older brothers and 4 older sisters, all living and working in Mudtown. Their parents had died during an epidemic almost a decade ago, and the eldest brother and sister had stepped up to keep everyone together. Kieran's whole family had apparently been pooling their money for years in order to pay his way into the magisterium, presumably with the intent that he would find some decent employment and help his family finally get some stability. In the meanwhile, Kieran had plenty to say on other topics. He would chatter on for long stretches at a time about any subject that caught his interest. Sometimes he would talk about one particular section of Mudtown where the buildings had been built before Acre was founded, and so their ground floors were flooded. Other times he would talk about how he used to catch fish in the canals and which parts of the city made for the best fishing grounds. One time he went on almost for an hour about the different kinds of goods that were traded in the markets at Accra, and how by carefully reading the currents of the markets one could almost pull money out of thin air. The inner workings of money and investment were a particular delight to Kieran. He had discovered a passion for mathematics during his remedial lessons, and now hoped to secure a position at the Central Bank of Accra when his education was complete. One particular night, Kieran asked Shenna about Riverwatch. Not about Shenna's daily life there, but about the town itself. What were the street layouts like? How had the districts been planned? What were the major industries in the region? How much wheat and wool did they export every year? Roughly how much money was in circulation there, and might they possibly have need of a local bank? Of course, Shenna wasn't able to answer most of Kieran's questions. Indeed, she hadn't considered most of them before. Why should a mere witch's apprentice concern herself with something as obtuse as the inner workings of the wheat and wool trade? Once Kieran learned that Shenna had been a witch's apprentice, his questions became somewhat easier for Shenna to answer. Kieran was fascinated to learn that the village elders paid Mistress Morana's expenses in exchange for her providing service without charging her patients directly, as was done in Accra. Shenna told him about all the sorts of injuries and maladies she regularly encountered, and just how each one was treated. She also talked about which medicinal herbs Mistress Morana cultivated in her garden, including which ones Shenna now knew to be false remedies. That part Kieran found rather perplexing. Why would someone grow a particular herb if it wasn't actually going to do anything to help? The idea that Mistress Morana might simply not have known evidently hadn't occurred to him. When Shenna returned to her dormitory that night, she took one last look through a history of the practice of medicine and the healing arts. She had read the book twice through by this point, and it was long past time to set it aside and return to Magistress Karna's reading list. There was only so much more time before the new course cycle started up, after all. Still, it had been nice to reconnect with medicine and healing. A sweet reminder of those happy days in Riverwatch before her life took this sharp swerve into the unfamiliar. Maybe after a few more years, Shenna could venture back there. Perhaps she could quietly slip back into her old life. Maybe all the wisdom she had taken from this book would be enough to convince the village elders to forgive her? Or more likely they would just consider it more blasphemous knowledge and toss her right back into the guardhouse to await execution all over again. If only there was a magic that could turn back time, to let her return to those carefree days of youth and stay there forever. Shenna sighed and closed the book and laid herself down to sleep. It was no use daydreaming. She would never return to Riverwatch again. Accra was her home now. She returned the book to the library the next morning before she began her day duties. Magister Rennick no longer supervised her personally, delegating the task to a gray-robed mage associate whose name Shenna didn't know. By now, the work wasn't nearly so intimidating as it had initially seemed. Shenna barely noticed the hours slipping by, and the moment when the next student arrived to relieve her came almost as a surprise. After a quick trip to the refectory, Shenna was back in the library, sitting in that alcove on the third floor, staring once again at that tedious brick of a volume that was the comprehensive history of the free city of Accra. Well, Shenna thought, nothing else to do but get started. She reached out and gingerly opened the book, as though turning over a rotten log in the forest that might at any moment crumble into a putrid mess. She skimmed through the content directory as quickly as she could until she reached the page marked Prelude on the Study of Philosophy and History, where the book technically began. Reluctantly, Shenna began to read, forcing her eyes to endure the tedious ruminations on the importance of knowledge of the past and what it reveals about the nature of man and society. Shenna almost made it to the end of the second page before she began stealing quick glances up at the shelves across from her. Other books ready to reveal their secrets, tempting her with titles such as On the Nature and Development of the Written Word. Probably quite an illuminating subject for someone like Shenna who had only just learned how to read. There was also A History of Currency in All Its Forms. Maybe Shenna could point out that volume to Kieran. He would be sure to find it interesting. And then there was A History of the Discovery and Study of Magic. Why couldn't Shenna be reading that one instead? The study of magic was the purpose of the magisterium, after all. Shenna got up out of her seat and crossed to the other side of the alcove to fetch that book. It had to be more interesting than this one. She had almost reached the shelf when a stray glance down to the ground floor pulled her attention to the atrium where magic was still being sold. There was a man standing before the counter with a long pole lantern resting on his shoulder. A lamp guide. Yannick? Shenna quickly whirled about and rushed to the stairwell. She barreled down the steps and burst out onto the ground floor, just barely evading a passing librarian pushing a heavy cart of books. But by the time Shenna reached the atrium, the lamp guide had already concluded his business and departed. Shenna continued on towards the main entrance itself, but by the time she had pushed around the waiting queue and emerged into the afternoon sunlight, the lamp guide was nowhere to be found. There were no other lamp guides waiting in the queue either. Shenna sighed and slipped back into the library, only to be ambushed by the librarian she had nearly collided with earlier, who angrily pulled her aside for a stern lecture about not running in the library. By the time Shenna returned to her third-floor alcove, she had decided that the lamp guide probably hadn't been Yannick after all. She hadn't got a good look at whoever it was, but they were probably too tall and too old to be Yannick. Additionally, his clothes were probably different than Shenna remembered. Maybe just a little too fine for a struggling lamp guide. Maybe the man was probably a servant attached to some noble estate who sometimes did duty with a lamp. Or maybe Shenna really had just missed Yannick and she was cooking up excuses to make herself feel better. Shenna sat back down in front of the book, but couldn't bring herself to start reading again. This was the only place in Acre where Yannick could purchase magic for his lamp. He would have to stop by here eventually. And maybe if Shenna kept watching the queue, she might see him when he turned up for his monthly purchase. Or perhaps he had already stopped by a few days ago and wouldn't be back for another month. What to do? Shenna was still consumed with Yannick later that night as she sat recharging the crystals beneath the concentrated moonlight atop the spire. Every now and again she would gaze out across the rooftops. Yannick was out there somewhere. Was he keeping safe? Was he turning a profit? The seasons would be changing soon. Would there still be enough work for him? Was he following Shenna's suggestion about organizing with the other lamp guides? So much uncertainty. It's simple mathematics, Kieran was saying as he worked the cargo pulley. You know how the area of a shape increases by the square, but not its perimeter? Well, it's the same way with trading. When you buy in larger quantities, the total price goes up, of course, but the cost for each individual unit goes down because it's more efficient, you see? The traders call it buying at scale. Interesting, Shenna said, without particularly meaning it. I know, Kieran went on. You can see it all over the place. It's like these crystals, for example. I was talking to one of the magisters about them the other day, and he said that the full-grade crystals hold about 60 times as much magic as the smaller ones, but they only cost 30 times more than the small-grade crystals, so it's like getting the magic at half price. Shenna looked down at the crystal in her hand. A freshly charged full-grade unit. There was enough magic in there for Yannick to use in 5 whole years. And for half the total cost, he would already be turning a comfortable profit if he could have purchased one of these. But instead, he was stuck buying the smaller crystals each month for twice the total price over the long run. He simply didn't have enough money to buy on the cheap. That doesn't seem fair at all. What doesn't? Kieran asked. Oh, nothing. Just thinking out loud, Shenna said, setting the finished crystal into the chest and moving on to the next one. Where do you learn all this stuff, anyways? Oh, different places, Kieran said. Some of it from my brothers and sisters. Other things I figure out on my own. Most of the time I talk to people and ask them questions. What kind of people? Traders, shopkeepers, street sellers, boatmen, Kieran said. Anyone who looks interesting. Shenna stared incredulously at the boy. You mean to say you just walk up to people on the street and ask them questions about their work? Kieran shrugged. I like knowing things. Have you been to the Magisterium Library yet? Shenna suggested. Lots of interesting things to read about in there. And you don't need to go asking questions of random people on the street for it. I haven't been over there as much as I'd like, Kieran said. I work cargo down by the Watergate for my day duty. I wanted to do magic distribution in the library, but they were holding the last spot open for somebody else. I think that was me. Oh, Shenna flushed. That's inconvenient. The rest of the break passed without much incident. After the full moon, their hours at the Moonspire began to stretch later into the evening due to the later moonrise, but thankfully their workload became lighter to compensate. In the library, Shenna watched from the balcony every day for the rest of the break, and although a few more lamp guides appeared, she did not see Yannick. As for the comprehensive history of the Free City of Accra, she never did get around to finishing it. And that's that.
Dude, Kieran went total Ferengi. Are you not familiar with Star Trek?
Yeah, I know Deep Space Nine. I'm just
I'm vaguely
I
familiar
can
with
see where you're
that.
coming from in that.
Well, with the explanation he gave, I was expecting a rule of acquisition to come up.
Well, you might feel a little bit more of a Ferengi from him in that scene I have planned for a bit later in the book. As to your question, Becca, this is still very early in the book. Maybe like just under a third.
Damn, me and Carl in the same place.
But I got to admit, I am always interested in honestly, when economics and this kind of stuff comes up in fantasy worlds, because that's something that's brought up but never truly explored. You know what I mean? Like how, what is the banking system? What's making the currency have value? What are the trades and everything? How does this city function in a realistic way?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I've almost mentioned one of the primary influences for this was the Saga of Recluse series. Especially there's I mentioned there's one scene in I think book 8 where the main character basically, it's a plot I basically lifted from it. Main character goes off to join an order of mages that control this city, and the first job they have him do is cleaning out the sewers with magic. It's one of those things that you just say, I didn't really anticipate this being the direction that you would take the story, but now that I think about it, yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense.
Honestly, I can see that being really satisfying, just seeing all the gut go away. Mm-hmm. It's like when you clean grout, it's like, yes, go away.
I hate you.
Actually, it's funny. Later on in my thing, I sort of lampooned the idea of ROUSs because the idea is that Aviana is sent to go get something from to kill a rat in a storeroom, and it's just like the way I sort of present it, it's like a beginner level quest.
That's so
well,
funny.
you can't have fantasy without killing
without killing the local rodent population.
Yeah.
Here's your first mission. Go to this bank thing. You'll also probably be making a bank account during this side quest.
What's an unusual size? I don't think they exist. Proceeds to get it
Mauled
to get tackled. Yeah.
in the fucking swamps of Dagobah. That shit looked like the set for Dagobah.
It kind of does, actually. Yeah, that's not an inaccurate take, actually.
But yeah, but overall, I did find it an interesting chapter, Carl.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know. I did kind of worry that the rant about economies of scale kind of came out of nowhere.
No, he's autistic. It's fine. Like you've set this up.
Yeah. Yeah, he's special needs. Yeah, he's neurodivergent or whatever they want us to call it these days.
Don't
Just say
worry,
autistic.
though, a few more chapters, we will finally get to the zombies.
Oh, I was thinking of an idea for my thing with zombies, but that's another story for another time. But anyways, but I can just kind of see this sort of character becoming like I know we're talking more about Kieran than than Shenna, but I just kind of find it funny because of the way he acts and everything. I can imagine she doesn't see him for 10 years, and then in that 10 years, he starts running the local mob. Not like a malicious thing. It's just like, hey, opportunity. He's doing a lot of privateer, a lot of what's that? Racketeering. That's the word I'm thinking of.
You have giant rabbits in your setting, right, Tarek? According
Yes,
to
I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, they're about 6 feet tall. I think like 12 inches, not 12 inches, 12 feet long, and they are fucking vicious.
I have to ask, why did you feel like you wanted to do that?
Because I didn't want orcs, goblins, etc. So I was like, well, what can I use here that, is still dangerous? And I'm like, well, what about literal giant animals that have freaking been infested by radiation?
Damn. Dinosaurs beware.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, why don't we have yours next, Bard?
All right, that sounds good to me. Let me just pull it up. Well, it's already up, but you gonna mute aspiring? Okay. So last time we left off, Aviana was told that Aviana arrived to participate in the local youth tournament for the festival that's going on. And in that time, she got a look at the competition and was talking to another girl named Tate, who her father revealed that their family's actually good friends with Silas. And that leads us to where we are today. When the three of them walked back into the tent, they had found everyone gathering around a large board with several lined brackets. Each line led to a shield with an emblem on it. Standing next to the board was the same clerk who stood outside when she first arrived. This will be a single elimination tournament. There are 16 participants this year, so we are going to have 31 matchups. Now for the rules. You are only allowed to use the weapons we provide you. You lose if you give up, are knocked down for 10 seconds, or it's clear that you cannot fight anymore. Killing your opponent is strictly forbidden. If you do this, you will be executed on the spot. Aviana sighed in relief at the last rule. Now, come up and find your sponsor's crest. The first two contestants are to collect their preferred weapons, get their armor on, and come and wait by the entrance to the arena. The clerk finished before stepping away from the board. Everyone gathered closer to the board and began to look up and down at the symbols. Aviana squinted and stared at the board, feeling nervous, as she tried her best to interpret what each one was. It was then that Tate noticed her concern. "What's the matter?" she asked. "I don't know what Silas's crest is," Aviana whispered, lowering her head. It's a gray hare with a black shield, Baron answered. A hare? Aviana asked with a giggle. Ask him about it sometimes. He's quite proud of that crest, Baron said with a grin. Aviana smiled back and took another look at the board. She didn't need to look far, as Silas's crest was right at the top. The crest right next to it was a red shield with what looked to be a black and white badger on it. Aviana turned to Tate to ask who it was when she noticed a large grin on the girl's face. We're both in the first round! Aviana's heart sank at the revelation. She could already picture Tate standing over her victorious. Don't fret, lass. I'm sure you'll do fine. Even if you lose, just think of it as a learning experience. But who knows? Maybe all that training with Silas will pay off, Baron said, putting his large hand on her shoulder. Shouldn't you be telling me that? Tate asked. You know I'll be rooting for you, Tate. The lass just looked like she needed some kind of encouragement, Baron said, laughing. Now go get your weapons. You two. Your match will start in a few moments. Aviana watched as Tate went over to the weapon rack and lifted up a sword, giving it a few experimental swings. Before Aviana could go to the rack, she felt Baron's hand tighten around her shoulder and heard him whisper into her ear. Silas told me to remind you that you're representing him. The man has faith that you'll do him proud, so give it all that you got. Aviana's lips curled into a smile and she nodded to Baron, her nerves becoming somewhat more at ease. After taking his hand off her shoulder, she walked towards the weapon rack and picked up a wooden sword by the hilt. He really believes in me, she said, giving the sword a practice swing as her smile grew wider. Participants of round 1, please approach the arena entrance, the clerk announced. Aviana nearly dropped her sword and hurriedly grabbed a leather helmet off the rack. She brushed her bangs to the side and strapped the helmet on, trapping her black hair underneath it. She and Tate both arrived at the entrance to the arena at the same time, where the clerk was standing. The clerk suddenly stopped and looked at Aviana and snickered before composing himself. Aviana rolled her eyes and heard a disapproving, almost disgusted grunt from Tate. Name is announced. Go and stand at the white lines painted at the center of the field. Do not begin until King Tyrael tells you to. If you disobey this, you will be disqualified. Aviana nodded and looked towards Tate. She could see the fiery, determined glow in the girl's emerald eyes. She also noticed that instead of a wooden sword in her hand, there was a wooden spear. Aviana's sword trembled in her hand. Silas had only trained her to fight other swordsmen, and she hadn't even seen someone fight with a spear until this morning. Lords and ladies of Tyrion, we are proud to present our first 2 contestants this year's youth tournament. King Tyrael announced. King Tyrael's announcement was followed by a large cheer. Please welcome from the representative from House Tyrsta, Tate Tyrsta. Tate smiled and opened the flap to the tent. Suddenly, a louder applause rang out. Aviana took a moment while the flap was open to view the arena. She could see several guardians around the perimeter just below the bleacher seats. Each one of them was standing firm, with their heads constantly moving to scan the area. Before she could observe any more, the tent flap was closed again. Tate's opponent will be representing House Breen. Aviana, the king announced, sounding somewhat confused. Aviana slowly exited the tent and walked towards Tate. The applause had been replaced with murmuring and sounds of disapproval. She turned towards the bleachers and saw that they were mostly filled. Every set of eyes in the seats was staring at her with bewilderment, if not outright disgust. A cold sweat ran down her forehead as she continued towards the starting line. Block them out. Only focus on your opponent, Aviana said to herself as she turned towards Tate. However, the closer she got to her mark, the louder the criticisms became from the crowd. Is this a noble's idea of a joke? A man called out. If it is, you have to admit, it's a pretty funny one, a woman commented. Might as well have just sent a jester to fight, an older man's voice yelled. Don't listen to them. Their words won't help you, she said to herself, trying to ignore the rest of the comments, as well as the soft laughter working its way through the audience. She risked a quick glance at the noble tent and saw that the chancellor was sitting with Raquela on his right, who gave her a small wave. The chancellor gave her a small, almost unnoticeable nod, which helped to lift her spirits. To the chancellor's left, she saw that Silas was sitting next to him. Unlike earlier this morning, Silas was dressed as though he was meeting with King Tyrael personally. He wore a wine-colored shirt with a purple cloak, the hems of which were made of fur. Even from this distance, she could see that he was wearing a large gold necklace and a gold ring on his left hand. The various colors and finer clothing made him much easier to spot than he had ever been before. It wasn't until her gaze met his that she noticed a small smile on his face before it returned to its normal expression. Aviana took her place at the line across from Tate, who was in a battle stance, her left leg in front of her and her knee bent, and her right leg behind her. Her spear tip facing towards her, with her left hand at the bottom of the shaft and her right at the midpoint. Aviana slowly got into position, bending her right knee and raising her sword upwards. She could still hear the murmuring and feel the eyes of everyone in the arena looking at her. Focus only on your opponent. Focus only on your opponent, Aviana repeated to herself over and over again. The arena suddenly went quiet. Even the wind refused to blow, as though savoring the moment. The only thing Aviana could hear was the continuous repeating of her mantra. "Begin!" shouted the voice of King Tyrael. Aviana was so focused on the mantra, the command took her by surprise. Tate wasted no time and quickly charged Aviana. Quickly charged Aviana. The girl's speed was incredible as she closed the distance between them in less than a moment, with her spear poised to stab her. Aviana stumbled with all the grace of a drunkard, just barely missing the girl's attack. By the time she had caught her footing, Tate rebounded and thrust for her head, only to feint and hit her torso. Aviana staggered as the spear caught her stomach, and she started to cough. A moment later, she cried out in pain as the left side of her chest throbbed in agony. When she looked down, she saw that Tate had swung the spear, Tate had swung the spear when she was recoiling from the first blow. Thankfully, the pain was manageable compared to Silas's strikes, and she shook it off without a grunt. "Hey, I wasn't ready," Aviana whined and took several deep breaths. "Aw, I'm sorry. Did you want a cup of tea first?" Tate said with a laugh before swinging her spear again. Aviana growled and swung her sword at Tate, who parried with the spear. Tate was quick to pull back. Aviana charged forward, swinging her sword to the right, but found herself hit again as Tate jumped to the left and swung. She turned to Tate, who was wearing a cocky smile as she quickly backstepped in an attempt to thrust the spear into her chest again. Aviana stumbled to the left and felt the spear just barely pass under her sword arm. Thinking quickly, she closed her arm and caught the spear and held it as tightly as she could. Tate pulled the spear in an attempt to free it from Aviana's grasp. With each tug, Aviana stumbled as this weapon slowly began to become free. "Let go!" Tate ordered. "If you insist," Aviana said with a smile. Just as Tate was pulling again, Aviana opened her arm and watched as Tate was thrown off balance and stumbled. She took the opportunity and ran forward and swung for her right. Tate let out a cry of pain as her sword struck Tate's right arm. Aviana pressed her attack, swinging the sword as fast and as hard as she could, smacking Tate in the left arm as she attempted to dodge. She was just about to swing for her chest when suddenly her sword was blocked by Tate's spear again. "Not bad for an amateur," Tate said with a scowl, her spear pressing harder against Aviana's sword. Aviana's legs trembled as Tate continued to push her weight on her. Aviana pushed back as hard as she could, but found she was the one taking steps back. Just as she was about to disengage, a swift kick was delivered to her chest that sent her stumbling backwards. She waved her hand to catch her balance when Tate's spear slammed into her chest with the tip. That attack was followed by a quick smack against her left ribs and another stab in her stomach. Aviana bent over, gagging, nearly vomiting as she looked at the floor. Before she could raise her head, she was whacked with the head of Tate's spear, and she fell face first into the dirt and mud. 1, 2, the countdown began. Even with the helmet, the blow had caused Aviana's ears to ring and her vision to become disoriented. 3, 4. Aviana slowly got to her feet, her head spinning and her body stumbling. The world continued to spin, but when she got up, she noticed that Tate had dropped her guard, and her expression looked somewhat concerned. Aviana continued to wobble and try to correct herself when suddenly she got an idea. She wobbled towards Tate, still moving in a drunkenly fashion, nearly falling all over herself. Just as she arrived in front of Tate, she suddenly swung her sword into Tate's side as hard as she could. Tate cried out in pain and stumbled, backing away. Suddenly, jeers interrupted from the audience as they began to boo and throw things at her. "Shame on you," a woman cried out. "Fighting dirty, in front of the king no less? This is why Civets are scum," another man cried. "Disqualify her," a woman demanded. The jeering and booing continued as Aviana looked around confused. Silas had told her that fighting dirty was a good tactic. She hadn't done anything wrong. The goal was to win, wasn't it? Not a bad trick. Too bad it'll only work once, Tate said, sounding somewhat amused. Before she could react, Tate's spear slammed into her chest again, sending her stumbling back. Tate pressed the attack, smacking her side, stabbing her in the stomach, and hitting her all over. After a few moments, the assault stopped, and Aviana bent over, her hands on her knees, and vomited onto the floor. She panted and gasped for breath, her entire body feeling as though she had just been run over by a horse. I can't disappoint them, Aviana said aloud between ragged breaths, as the audience began to shout Tate's name. She slowly got up again, her body sore and her legs wobbling. Without thinking, Aviana rushed Tate's and swung her sword, only to be parried by the spear. In the midst of the parry, she curled up her left hand into a fist and attempted to swing at Tate's face when she wasn't looking. She heard her fist meet some kind of flesh, but when she looked, she saw that Tate had dropped her hand off the spear to catch it. Nice try. First rule of battle, always be aware of what's going on around you, Tate said, grinning. Aviana growled but stopped as she noticed that Tate's parry had significantly weakened after she had dropped her hand to block the punch. Thinking quickly, she slammed the sword into Tate's spear. The strike jerked the spear so hard it fell out of Tate's hand, and Aviana watched as it fell out onto the ground. Smiling, she turned back to Tate only to see a fist coming towards her face before slamming into her cheek. The punch had been so sudden and powerful that she fell flat onto the floor. Aviana groaned and slowly pushed herself up when suddenly there was a smack on the back of her head and she fell, her sword dropping out of her hand. She groaned and rolled over, the world spinning around her violently and her ears ringing. 6, 7, 8, 9, she heard the announcer calling through the ringing. No, Aviana weakly cried as she attempted to get up. The most she could do was squirm. 10! Victory for House Tiersta! The announcer yelled as the loudest cheer of all erupted from the crowd. Aviana groaned as tears streamed from her eyes, dirt turning into mud as it ran down her cheeks. Suddenly, 2 strong sets of hands grabbed her and lifted her up, her feet dragging against the ground. As she was dragged away, she couldn't even bear to look up at the stands. All she could do was hang her head in defeat. Aviana yelped as she felt the sting of medicine being applied to a cut on her arm and cheek. The man applying the medicine said nothing, but wouldn't stop giving her dirty looks as he pressed the rag and dipped in medicine into the cut. After a few minutes, the man finally put the rag down and got up. Aviana lifted her head, just barely looking him in the eyes. Thank you, Aviana said meekly. The man scowled and turned away, mumbling something. The most she could catch was, filthy cheat. Aviana's heart grew heavy. She should have been used to being insulted like this. Yet, she had done nothing wrong. She fought the way she was taught to fight. Silas, Aviana said quietly, dreading what he would say about the whole thing. Suddenly, she heard the crowd cheering again. No doubt the second round had started. Aviana groaned and got up out of her chair and walked outside the tent, her head still throbbing. Just as she exited, she saw Tate walking toward her with a smile on her face. That was a great match, Aviana, Tate said, extending her hand. Aviana looked down at it and pushed it away. Leave me alone, she said with her low voice. Don't be undignified in defeat, lass. You put up a good fight, and you really gave it your all. The crowd may not have liked it, but you fought like a true warrior, and faking that concussion was sheer brilliance, the man Baron said, approaching the two of them. Just leave me alone, Aviana yelled, not caring that she was drawing eyes of passers-by. She pushed Tate out of the way and ran as fast as she could into the crowds, not even looking back to see if Tate or Baron was following her. She knocked into several people as she pushed her way through the crowds, tears dripping down her cheeks as she ran. After a few minutes, she found a quiet spot under a tree and sat there. She pulled her legs up to her chest and wiped the tears from her cheeks with her dirty pant legs. I never should have believed I could do this, Aviana sobbed. And that's it.
Fuck you.
That was horrible.
Oh.
That's just so. How can you be so mean to your characters? I fucking love it.
How can you be mean to me? I want more, mate. Don't just stop at the tree.
This is the worst story I have ever read. When is the next fucking chapter coming out?
Actually, now that season's over for my job, it should be not too long from now. Hopefully, in about 2 weeks, if I can keep the schedule up.
Not bad.
Nice.
So, what do you think though about like the essential Batman character of Silas having a coat of arms with a bunny on it?
Oh, I didn't notice that. That's actually really hilarious.
They mentioned a hare, right?
Yeah, a hare is just a large rabbit.
Yeah.
Big rabbit.
Here's the thing. Considering what you just told me about the demon mutant rabbits of your world, I think this honestly would be the most terrifying fucking thing to have.
This isn't. Those are called banelings. This is just a hare. This is just a rabbit. This isn't like a mutant rabbit. This is just a regular rabbit.
Still,
I love that
it's
you
like,
called the Badelings after. I don't know if you know this, but that's actually the name of a basically a bunch of devil worshippers.
I did not know that. No.
And Terry Goodkind's Sort of Truth series. They're made into zombies, sentient zombies in the TV show.
there are your zombies, Tarek.
But I do kind of like it. One thing, and I know this is me sucking my own dick right now, but one thing I do kind of like is that Baron has a history with Silas. So the way he's acting with Aviana specifically is like, obviously even his daughter calls him out on it, but he's like, look, this girl clearly has nothing. The way I interpret that, like the way I wrote it, I think I was thinking like, they've been talking to each other. He knows who she is. She just doesn't know who he is.
One thing I also thought was good about it was, well, I guess that she loses and that there's a great deal of public anti-sentiment regarding Miss Aviana, which is very consistent.
No one likes her. No one in this goddamn city likes her.
Clearly. Wouldn't she have been taught the rules, or are there no rules? Or...
No, it's not. It's not that she couldn't do this with the technique she did. It's just considered poor form.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
that makes sense.
The thing of having to please the crowd, and the crowd likes honor. Like, you remember Stormlight and how Edlin fucks up one guy in 5 seconds, and everyone was pissed, but it was like he didn't break any rules.
Yeah, they paid for blood.
Yeah, kind of the gladiatorial type thing.
Yeah,
you gotta be a showman.
I am quite surprised I had enough restraint not to just have these kids slaughter each other, like with actual weaponry. I kept it tame.
Yeah, you didn't go full Hunger Games. Never go full Hunger Games.
I'd be fine with full Hunger Games.
I was talking to Dunn about that not too long ago. I was telling him, I kind of want to just have 1 year where they just say, "All right, children, it's a battle royale. Let's see who comes out on top."
We are whittling out the weaklings among you. If you wish to be part of this generation, don't die.
If you die, it is okay.
This is the purpose of the contest.
So, some of you may die, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make. I need to get that clip for when we watch a really bad movie like Aladdin 2019 or Ghostbusters 2016.
When are you planning on doing the Aladdin ones?
I think the Aladdin ones are probably going to be Saturdays because otherwise the convergence of timings won't work.
I can do Saturdays, most likely.
Okay, so we'll just do. Maybe we'll try to do tomorrow since we're not doing Witcher tomorrow. We'll just watch the first movie for those who haven't seen it yet, like Valerian.
How dare he?
Just real quick before you guys continue, any other thoughts, any other critiques, any other ideas?
It was
I
good.
like the action. The action was
Yeah,
very
you did
Yes.
a good job.
follow.
Yeah, you did good job writing the action.
Yep.
Well, we are watching a good movie. We're watching it, the first good movie tomorrow. The first movie
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Becca, we're having both. We're gonna see the good one, the really, really good one with the nice songs, and then we're gonna see the shit one with the super shit song that I'm gonna fucking rant about.
The only thing I want to just bring up real quick is the idea with her throwing a punch though. I just kind of wanted it to devolve into literally two children fighting.
Yeah.
I felt it worked. It's like, yeah, you don't tend to use your hands, but it is something you can do. And then we see someone who is not only aware of this, but knows how to do it better.
It just clocks her in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see the spear there? Go get it. Fucking hell.
Here, get the stick. Get the stick. Get the stick. There's no stick.
Smack. I would have loved it if she bitch slapped her. Genuinely, I would have loved the bitch slap.
You see, if she wasn't trained by mercenaries, I would have probably had her just give like a firm pimp slap. But I think because she was trained by a mountain of a man, she would know how to throw a punch. Aviana doesn't, like, at all. She has no idea how to do hand-to-hand. So even if the punch connected, it probably would have just dazed her for half a second before she just gets smacked with a stick.
Have fun with Blue Wilson. You're joining us, Becca. I will bring you on that stream.
Have fun with
Also-
Blue Wheels. Genie,
Just,
wishes, lamp. None of them ringing a bell.
One of the last roles Will Smith will ever do. Also, what else?
Well, he's been doing like mostly like prestige dramas like King Richard lately.
Well, I'm mostly thinking that he's about to get really unpopular to have any role now.
Oh yeah.
Just rip.
I love it. She said, "No, I'm not. I'm working."
Becca, will you at least join for the good one? At least be there for the good one.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Have we met the her opponent before? I can't remember. Maybe it's just because like introspective.
Tate?
Yeah.
She was introduced in the chapter beforehand. It was she was introduced to the chapter before, but like I said, it's revealed in that chapter that there's history between her father and Silas. So that's why they're acting so not cordial, but so casual with her, if you get what I mean. Like, the father has a passing familiarity with her because of his interactions with Silas that you don't get to see, because it's all from Aviana's perspective.
They hang out around the water cooler, essentially.
Yeah, essentially, like, you know, he'll go visit. It's his buddy. You know what I mean? It's sort of like when you meet someone only your parents knows, and they go, "Oh, I've heard all this about you, yada yada yada." You know what I'm talking about.
Okay, that'll work. Alrighty.
Yeah,
any other
I'm
questions
definitely
for Rick?
gonna read your stuff after this to try and like actually get full context, since I'm only here for like half your chapters.
All right, sounds good. It's just too bad the book's not done yet.
That's fine. That means I have something to wait for.
No worries.
Well,
Mine's
Sanderson's-
also available to read for the moment on the on my little section of the Discord as well.
Alrighty, so we're about halfway through what I have written of the 71k words for Night of the Abyss. So what's happened so far is we've had a character named Mordred who was imprisoned in the deepest depths of hell for a really long time. Now has clawed his way back and has hijacked somebody else's body. And he was able to save a group of people from an army of demons by putting his life on the line in a duel. And the problem is there's a bunch of people like him who aren't necessarily as friendly to humanity, shall we say, who have infiltrated high levels of government and are going to be sending out demons to covertly weaken the population. And Mordred just barely arrived at the new city, and he has been both doing good deeds, but also like stirring up the population by accident by destroying the property of the merchant people who were swindling their customers out of their money. And he just barely got confronted by the religious people, and is now talking with two of his allies regarding like what is going to be happening in the war to come. And that's where we are starting.
Just real quick, I apologize. What you were saying about the merchant people and everything. Dun, how can you be so anti-Semitic?
You seriously just confused done and dunked? Gee!
It's 2 words off. 2 letters off. Come on.
I know, but...
Actually, 1 letter off. But who's talking? Don't worry, we like you. We will never be mad at you.
Antisocial? That's insulting to me. I feel targeted.
Okay. Chapter 14. Mordred sighed and rested his hand on his upraised knee. Sorry I didn't let you know about my little excursion, but I needed to see how this place was being treated. Varys let out a low grunt of annoyance. Those priests are going to be a nuisance, he grimaced. Did you have to say all that? How did you know what to say all that to them? I told them who I am, Mordred said calmly. That's all. You can't be the Herald. Varys trailed off under Mordred's calm gaze. Oh, Drajen, he cursed. You're serious. You believe that nonsense? The concept of the goddess that has evolved into the religion as it stands now was created 4,000 years ago by me, Mordred explained, casually flexing his deformed left hand and meeting Varys' eyes. Casually, he gestured calmly, he gestured on the shrine. At the shrine around them. I built this as a way to honor my mother's memory and preserve what he taught me. So the goddess was an elder one? Varys shook his head, chuckling as if he'd heard the best joke in the world. Abruptly, a smug grin spread across his face, and he smacked his fist into his palm. So I was right the whole time. Religion is a farce based around superstition. I didn't say that. Mordred turned his deformed hand around so he could examine it. I believe there is some sort of higher power. How evolved they are is a mystery to me, but how else are others like me created except by a higher power? We need someone else to form our bodies as a way of housing our spirits. How the first ones came into being, I don't know. But the notion that we just emerge from nothing seems rather reductive to me. Varys' self-satisfied expression melted. Kerr was mildly impressed that Mordred had managed to stymie the other man's atheist rhetoric. She'd fought with him repeatedly on the subject before she and Arthur had gotten married, but in the end they'd fallen into more of a playful patter. Either way, Varys' rational mind was clearly trying to form some sort of rebuttal. The world has no place for things like what you described, he said finally. There's only what we see here. I get the feeling there will be more things that you won't be able to explain with the information you've been presented with up to this point in your life. Mordred's smile was pleasant. There are more things in the world than in your philosophies. Let's agree to disagree and table this discussion indefinitely. Varys took a deep, calming breath. So, what is our next move? We are currently at a disadvantage. Mordred admitted. Our enemy can fairly easily deduce where I am, like based on the fact that they likely chose Arthur for possession and knew exactly who would take his body. It was still disconcerting hearing her husband's name after someone that looked like him, but wrong. As well as because you're proclaiming yourself to anyone with ears, Varys grimaced. It wouldn't have mattered. Mordred shook his head. Our enemy's strength lies in their anonymity, in hiding their identity from the people while they consolidate power. We must do all we can in the open to show the people that we are the ones they should flock to. Curran nodded in agreement, and Varys seemed to be considering what their friend was saying. I see your thought process, the old man said finally. So we work on gaming in their hearts and minds, I take it. That's where we should start, yes. Mordred flexed his deformed hand. Another issue that we have to consider is the fact that our enemies will be sending demons among the people to destabilize towns and cities. How? Carr asked. They can't pass for humans. Some can't. Mordred started tapping his fingers against his knee. However, there are other varieties that have the power to shapeshift. There are demons that will simply stay out of sight and deal damage from the shadows. What kind of damage? Varys asked, finally engaged by something more tangible than the esoteric nature of God. Secret, untraceable murders. Mordred ticked off his points off his fingers. Disease spreading, subtle to complete mind manipulation, deals that require human sacrifice and other dark forms of worship in exchange for wealth, bumper harvests, rain, and other benefits. He shrugged. Those are the broad categories. Each one falls into some degradation of those abilities. Well, I suppose that when we start hearing about human sacrifice, we'll go in and start clearing them out. Gar couldn't help a bit of unease entering her voice at this thought. Oh, they will be more subtle about it than rounding up people and just slaughtering them on an altar. Mordred started tapping his fingers against the stone next to him. It's easy to simply capture and kill travelers or grab the poor and disenfranchised beggars lying around the streets to use as sacrifices. Nobody will care about them, especially when their blood can be used to water their fields or be used for curses or fertility rites. Fertility rites? Varys shook his head. Surely you're not serious. Oh, I am. Mordred's conversational and calm tone made his next statement all the more disconcerting. There are a few different fertility rites, depending on the demon, but most of them boil down to bathing in blood, putting blood in a special pattern on your wife or husband that you can also do yourself as well. Mass orgies were very popular in certain groves, though they were preceded with a lot of sacrifices, one for every couple in attendance. Well, that's charming, Kara said dubiously. The whole talk of sacrifices and orgies was more than a little disconcerting. Did you attend one of these for research? No, I just talked with some survivors and got their story after I rescued them. Mordred's blade appeared in his hand, and used it for support. Not for the first time, Kara shuddered at the sight of it. The weapon felt wrong somehow. The thing had killed gods, and yet Mordred was perfectly comfortable with it. Casually, he ran his long claw-like fingernails down the edge, making a strange bell-like sound. These disease demons, Varys stroked his beard. What are they capable of? Unfortunately, all of them carry extremely deadly diseases. Some have cures, but others do not. There are 8 specifically that carry diseases that only I can cure. The possible death toll from even one of them would be somewhere in the hundreds to the thousands, depending on the type. What are the worst ones? Kara asked. Thrax, Noxious, and Ithari are the worst. Mordred made a slight motion with his hand, creating a trio of full-color twisted creatures. As soon as they appeared, Kara felt slightly sick looking at them. One was a scarlet creature with an angular face and short, knotted, dark purple hair. One of his fingers significantly longer than the others, almost like a knife. The second one had a massive green pustules and a bloated body, rotting mushrooms sprouting from his back and woody spines emerging from its eyes and shoulders. The final one was a strange black and white adult demon with a skull-like face, gray stones in place of eyes. Each one can kill their targets within 2 days at the fastest, a week at the slowest. Roger tapped his finger against his sword. It seemed like it was a benign habit while he was talking. Thrax causes a horrible inflammation in the brain and internal organs, causing the body to slowly burn from the inside out. Noxious rots them with sores, abrasions, and sometimes even mushroom-like growths that burst from the skin, giving it a tough time. Once it spreads to the heart and lungs, the victim will suffocate. And Ithari? Varys prompted. They will simply wither away, aging extremely rapidly until their natural processes give out. Mordred rolled his left shoulder. There are a few others that don't kill, but those are still quite nasty. He examined his deformed hand for a moment, then let it rest on the stones. There are quite a few that once they infect the population, their brains will be under their control, either with a parasite, or they die and the corpse is reanimated, or simply their wills become susceptible to the demon's control. That's terrifying. Kara rubbed her neck. She was not checking for mushroom growths. She wasn't. Mordred noticed her subtle movement and gave her a sympathetic look, but made no comment. She wasn't sure that if that made her like him or dislike him. On the one hand, he'd seen it. It had slipped that he'd seen it, which was a little annoying, but he hadn't commented on her unease, which was polite of him. Can we expect demons here? Varys asked, glancing around. Will we have to worry about our own turning it on us? Eventually, but they would have to go through a great deal of effort. Mordred slid a fingernail down on his sword blade. This place was built with certain protections that would require a very powerful demon to break through the walls. Baroks, if there's enough of them. Same with a dozen Tyrannics. Those things are very strong. The main thing we have to worry about is another Elder One. If there are two, they can destroy the wards with effort, but 3 will crack it open. Do we see any of those Titanics during the battle? Mordred shook his head. No. If you had, more would have died. What can they do? Kara pressed. Oh, quite a bit. Mordred created an image of a tall, squat, scaly, swept-horned creature with a long, blade-like protrusion on one arm, the other end in a stumpy, flat, metallic shell on the other. His head was a horrible mess, mostly taken by an angular mouth with large, interlocking fangs. That metal arm unleashes blasts of fire at whatever the target it puts its eyes on. It's also 3 times the height of a man. Wait. It's also twice the height of a man. Wait. Varys stared at the creature beside Mordred. That thing is 12 feet tall? Sometimes 15. Mordred dismissed the apparition. That's why I say those things are very dangerous. They're large, aggressive, and durable. If one comes your way, attack the left leg that's not made out of metal and only in a group. If you're alone, run. Sounds like there's more information that can be reasonably communicated in a short time. Varys rubbed his temples. How long will it take to give us a comprehensive summary of every demon species in existence. If I had all day, probably 2 years, Mordred said without hesitation. Varys paused, then swallowed. And there are hundreds of thousands of these creatures? He asked. Millions. Kara shuddered at the cold certainty in Mordred's voice. Every single evil person who has ever lived can be called from the Amaran Plain and given physical form. We can't win, Varys whispered. We lost a third of our men in the forest. I barely have enough money to cover the pay and upkeep of the city and my own lands for a couple years. Money isn't an object. Mordred waved his hand. Immediately, a pile of gold coins up to his head appeared next to him. Whatever funds we need, I'll cover it. Varys stared at Mordred, face frozen in a stark expression of abject shock that Kara had to stifle a laugh with difficulty. You have the ability to make money out of thin air? He stared at the money, face twitching violently. You can make money out of thin air? Is there an echo in here? Mordred asked mildly. This time Kara did burst out laughing. Not just because it was funny, but because Varys looked like a shocked fish. Mordred grinned slightly, which revealed slightly overlong canines through his lips. You should see your face, Kara chortled as Varys turned to glare on her. I'm glad you're amused by me seeing the solution to all my problems for the past couple decades be solved with a literal wave of the hand. And Varys snapped. Well, we have money. Now what do we do to get men? You'll have to tell me that. Mordred turned the coins to dust and let them blow away. The problem at the moment is that I only know about our enemies' powers and some of their weaknesses, but their plans are completely obscured to me. I also have no way of knowing what ways we can recruit people, since you know the lay of the land better than me. All right. Varys breathed out slowly and thought for a moment. Kara, can you possibly recruit some soldiers from the islands? Kara sighed and rubbed her arms. Maybe, but the issue stands that we don't have that many people compared to all the other kingdoms and demons that Mordred told us about. She licked her teeth absently. Maybe we can get a few people, but there's still the issue that we have a lot of distance between us and them. I have one ally who might be able to help. Varys stroked his chin. He has a large amount of contacts, a lot of troops, and a great deal of experience in the economic realm who can help us to get at all the channels we need. All right. So we'll meet with him. He'll give me a list of resources that we can use to sell at various marketplaces. We can send out recruiters to inform the people of the situation and bring troops to our banner. Mordred said simply. They won't turn on their government, Varys warned. They don't need to, Mordred said mildly. Our appeal will be toward the men in prisons and poorer areas. We have soldiers. We need recruits, but we need troops that we can form into more soldiers. There are advantages and disadvantages. Varys ticked them off on his fingers. We don't have the men to just train cells of random mercenaries, which these are going to be unless we just recruit random civilians. He trailed off when Mordred nodded. You cannot be serious. The people who are in the employ of the kingdom aren't going to come over to us, even if we ring every conceivable alarm bell. Mordred shrugged. Even with all the money that I can provide, I can't be everywhere at once. We're going to have to pull people from the poorer areas, debtors, criminals, etc., as well as by going to villages and towns to clear demons out. For emphasis, Mordred made a circle with his hands. This place needs to be the locus of our efforts, a bastion of safety from the demons. When people start experiencing demonic attacks, they will want to get away. If we can spread the word, we will be able to bring people to us. So how do we do that? Varys asked. You're the only one out of us who can fight demons effectively. Depends on the demon. Mordred slowly stood up, then growled in frustration. Ow! What is wrong with my hindquarters? I can't feel them. Kara snorted with laughter. It's asleep. It happens when you sit on hard rock for too long. She chuckled as Mordred frantically rubbed at his bottom to try and get some feeling into them. I'm going to hate this, aren't I? Mordred groaned and rubbed his chest. What's next? Going to sleep? You don't sleep? Kara asked. No, not a wink. Mordred shrugged, then flicked his leg as if trying to get some circulation into it. I'll have to figure out some way to purify my body so I don't have to deal with this nonsense. Wait, you didn't have to deal with your limbs falling asleep or actually needing rest? Kara asked in consternation. Nope. Mordred flexed his hand to dismiss his sword. Anyway, how else can I help? Well, I can give you whatever information and then decide on the best way of getting more followers. Varys was clearly stuck on the notion of recruiting what he considered the lowest dregs of society, the penniless and criminals. What are you going to do when your friends come around? Kara asked as they walked out of the shrine. My hope is that I'll be able to take them on piecemeal and kill them, Mordred admitted, sounding like he was trying to project confidence. Strangely, she did feel confident as he spoke, but somehow she could tell that he was doing something to make her feel more confident. Whether he was doing it consciously or not, that was slightly unclear. Do you think you can? Varys asked, clearly sensing a similar emotional prodding that Kara did. Depends on who comes after us first. Mordred raised his deformed hand and made a fist. With this infirmity, I need to practice fighting with one arm, since even though I have some function with this one, it's not strong enough to really keep up with my other one. Didn't seem like much of a problem when you were fighting those demons or those elder ones, Kara remarked mildly. Well, that's not the half of what I was capable of. Mordred clasped his hands behind his back. I was able to destroy armies, fight even the most powerful of my brethren, sometimes 3-on-1, but now my power is too much for my body, so much so that it just hangs around me like a cloud. I can't use much more or beyond a quarter to a half if I strain myself. From just about anyone else, she would have said that he was boasting and sulky and not being able to do what he used to do, but he seemed like he was telling it like it was, and he was accepting of the world as it was. Breathing out slowly, he glanced up at one of the statues of the Northern Bard goddess and smiled wanly. It's good that she's remembered. So the goddess is real, Varys said hesitantly. Yes, she is. Mordred made a quieting motion with his hand and a nod toward the priest and other people watching them. He placed his hand on Varys' shoulder and squeezed it once. We'll talk later, he said, voice low. We're not in the range of anybody who can hear. Varys nodded slowly and glanced around. So, where are you?
Hang on, you dropped out for a moment there. Did you go back a little bit? We might have missed something.
Okay. Yes, the goddess is real. Mordred made a quieting motion with his hands and nodded toward the priests and other people watching them. He placed the hand on Varys' shoulder and squeezed once. We'll talk later, he said, voice low. When we're not in range of anybody who can hear. Varys nodded slowly and glanced around. So, where are you going to go to take care of recruiting yourself? To take care of recruiting yourself, or are you going to stay here? I think that the task of coordinating resources is best suited to the man who knows better how this world works than I do. Mordred took a deep breath. Even if I could defend the city, I'll do better going out there doing the work that I'm best at. You know your capabilities better than me. Varys seemed to be chewing on his words. I'll manage logistics, but we need to figure out a way of communication just in case they send an army at us. Fair enough. I'll figure something out. It'll take time, but while I'm making some devices that will allow me to communicate and travel back to you, I can find out from you what the best option is in regards to the needs of our new faction. Mordred pursed his lips and thoughtfully. Instant transportation from one place to another is not going to be something I can create, but maybe I can do something that can accelerate my travel. How long do you think it'll take you? Varys asked. If it's a simple sound transmitter, I'll need a few days. Something eat a day, maybe something to bring me back. He blew out his cheeks. I'm going to need at least a week, possibly two. The amount of time that would likely take make Varys blanch. Does it need to be constant, or can you swap projects? Yeah, it does, but I should do the one that will bring me back first. Then I can do the others on the road. He shrugged. So you can't make something that can teleport you, but you can make something that will pull you back to the city? Kara frowned. What I can do is basically create a device that is tethered to me that I can use as a hook to pull me back here. Roger created a small image of a small man with a string running from his waist to a pole. I can't just use it to throw myself wherever I want. What will happen is I have a string that will pull me back to the city when I'm needed. But once I'm there, the string is wound up to the center point. If I want to go anywhere, I have to walk all the way there. As the strange man explained, the small figure he made was pulled to the pole at the center, then walked back out as if to demonstrate the concepts. Ah, I see, Kara nodded. And that requires less power, I assume? Mostly because I can only make one. The string analogy applies here as well. We created another pole with another string. The two lines attaching themselves to his waist. When he tried to move, the two strings pulled on each other and didn't allow him to stir to either one. If I'm tethered to two, I can't move to either. You're going to have to talk to my wife and Lailanis about how they can replicate some of what you can do, Varys chuckled. Unfortunately, the best I can do is get them the ability to use a few of my powers, even if I'm not in the immediate vicinity. But making objects of power is not one of them. He took a deep breath. I'll have to discuss some things with them, especially since there are things that I can teach your mages. I'll take care of giving Kat 8 and Lylana access to my powers when we get there, and then I'll fill you all in. So that sounds like a good plan, Varys nodded. Well, hopefully we can put some of the information you have to good use. I hope so as well. And that'll call it for today.
That must have been a lot for the people to absorb.
I'm currently just distracted.
That was, I'm not going to lie, that was dense. That was fucking dense.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of information there.
Like I don't even know how to call you an idiot because I have no idea what the information was.
You just call him an idiot and be like, they'll solve it.
Yeah, but I need to be precise in how he messed up. But I can't. I got at some dude, that was just fucking dense. I'm sure it'd be easier if I was reading from it, but my god.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of information.
Yeah, it's about 14 to... Okay, it's about 3 pages, so it's about 6 pages of fairly dense information.
Holy shit!
Yeah. Actually, yeah, about 6 pages.
Yikes.
What's that word count wise?
The word count. Let me see. 3,000 words, almost 4K.
Holy shit!
That is a a bit more than a medium chapter.
He said it was only 3 pages.
Single spaced.
Who uses single space, Done?
Me.
Well, actually, I think most books are written in single space. Like,
Are they? Because from what I'm aware,
Yeah.
you're supposed to write it in Times New Roman double space.
that's the manuscript.
Mm. When I put single space on my Word doc, it hurts my eyes.
I honestly don't even bother. I just I do single space in the IDE where I work, but I also have a blank line in between each paragraph, so it's easier to read that way.
I've honestly found that double spaced manuscript is easier to read. Like if you, especially for editing purposes.
Yeah. I don't know why. It does legit just hurt the eyes compared to because like you said, most books are single space, and I do not have my eyes in pain when I read them.
Textbook.
You still need to send me something of yours, Becca. I've never read a single thing you've ever written.
Yeah, you should share.
I've been telling her that for a while, but she's a perfectionist, which I think means she's never written a thing. That's right, sweetheart. I'm calling you out. If you want to prove me wrong, you got to come on here and actually read something.
Becca, just perfect one chapter and read it on here.
Yeah,
please not be like me.
Here's the problem. She explained that to me, that she's done that, but then when she's on to the next chapter, she's like, "Oh shit, I got to fix the first one again to correct the problems with the second chapter." I'm like, "Sweetie, for Christ's sake."
But here's the thing: I can somewhat empathize because I've had at least 10 times I've written over 20 chapters, then had to go back to the first and revise every chapter because I want to be I want to fix this in the previous ones. But you don't really need to, at least not that much.
That could be going, shut up, grr. You're missing an M, and also George R. R. Martin is not here.
That's the best you had? That was the fucking best that's the best you had?
Yes.
Fucking A. Why do you host this show?
Because he mentions orgies. Becca, okay, just here's the thing. If you perfect it too much, we won't have anything bad to say. Give us a break and come out here with something that has a problem for us to shit on.
That was the crappiest joke in human history.
That was the shittiest spelling of was and duh I have ever seen in human history.
Well, duh. It wasn't duh. It was done. Not duh.
No, that was duh. That was what she was
duh.
trying to say. That was duh. And then she put that was she.
That's how was she. That's what she.
Washi. But please, Becca, do
a
not.
new alien language.
I love it whenever we get on one of these tangents that Carl has enough dignity not to sink to these levels. I love it. He just goes silent, why the fuck do I hang out with these people?
Oh shit, are you talking about me?
Yes. Who else here is named Carl?
Alrighty. Any other feedback? Maybe I need to split it up or divest some of the information.
That would be helpful.
Some of the things you could maybe possibly sprinkle out in other sections.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to read it to tell because again,
other things are going on.
Yeah, since it's about almost 4,000 words. It's only 300 words short of 4,000.
So by definition, that wasn't an exposition dump. That was the entire fucking landfill.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. Well, at least I have reached some measure of low, the Darwin Awards of jokes.
I feel like we've done shittier jokes on this show. Maybe different kind of shit. I've done the Stormlight butt plug joke.
I don't
Now
know
I'm
what-
just imagining a Tesla coil. Somebody shoved a Tesla coil up their ass.
That says no exact.
Actually, haven't written anything in about 6 months. Got a lot on the at the moment. When I get back to it, I'll rework my prologue, the beginning of my book. Oh, okay, yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. Just saying, it might be faster if you send it and let people comment. But I do understand not wanting to let anyone see your first shit draft and be like, nah, I will finish it, and then you'll see it.
Well, I think that we will call it good for today. I gotta get prepped for a BioLife appointment, which means that I need to eat a lot of steak and
What
other
is-
sort of food.
What is BioLife appointment?
I'm whoring my plasma out for money.
Oh, you just mean those things? Okay.
Yeah.
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 As you do.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like $520 a month on.
Ah, for Christ's sake, Don. Just go out on a street corner and sell your body like a normal person.
Prostitution is a very lucrative business.
Not in
You're-
Utah.
No,
Not
but
in Utah.
Nevada's right next door, man.
Prostitution only exists in Salt Lake, not like mass suburbia where I live.
Okay, well, I'm in California. I can do prostitution all day. There will be a million clients.
Explains a whole lot. Yeah.
What do you mean? What are you implying?
Nothing. Anyway, I'll leave that up to you. That explains why you immediately go to prostitution, I guess. Thing is, in Utah, the only place where you can prostitute yourself requires a drive to Salt Lake, and even then, probably it's fairly illegal, I think.
Again, Nevada's next door. I'm just saying.
I ain't driving 5 hours for cheap change. I'm not that good looking. Alrighty, let's call it good for today. See you guys later.
See ya.
See ya, mates.